Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. As a reminder, I'm going to give a quick intro, and then our host, Chase Spenst, is going to lead us in a discussion followed by Q&A. So welcome, everybody. Chase is the CEO and founder of a company called Ground Control. I'll drop the link to their website in the chat box. Chase works with a lot of small businesses, primarily creative entrepreneurs like many of you. So he's got a really keen insight into the growth needs of small businesses and how to best navigate the options for financing, et cetera. I love this quote from Chase's website. He says, "I was seeing too many great businesses doing interesting things get crushed because they define success differently than what they were getting paid for. That's why I started Ground Control." So that tells you a little bit about who he is. Chase is joining us all the way from LA today. We are super excited. He's offered his valuable time to be with us and share his knowledge. And we're hopeful for continued partnership with Ground Control as we expand to West Coast. Maybe we don't have to go that far if you're coming to Atlanta. But as always, I'm going to be monitoring the chat boxes. Please, feel free to raise your hands if you have any questions, and feel free to pop in any time. We're going to save some dedicated time at the end, but you're welcome to, we'll take some time in the middle to pause for Q&A as well. So take it away, Chase. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, no, excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And just to reiterate that this will be a lot better if this is more of a conversation. So I've got something that we'll kind of walk through, but I mean, I'm guessing a lot of you have very similar questions, challenges, things like that. So if anyone has anything, we can certainly kind of steer this wherever it's most helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Hopefully, Leslie, give me a thumbs up if that's
you're good.
Cool. All right. So again, this is my company's Ground Control. Let's get this. There we go. Yeah. So a little bit about us, and I'll keep the long life story to kind of what's relevant here for Ground Control and for hopefully what you guys are doing, things like that. Ground Control was really built around, and I think that quote's a good place to start. This idea that we were watching a lot more people get into business, not because they liked business per se, but because they liked a very particular aspect of it. They liked the product, they liked the art, whatever it was that they were creating, and everything was trying to get shoved through this or a very narrow range of business models. Like you have to have a product to sell, or you have to have this to like subscribe, or all these different things. And more business models and revenue models have come out and taken shape, enabling a lot more creative businesses and paths. And so that's brought a lot more people who sort of have this like laser focus and interest in kind of making something really great and really special. And the business is just sort of the machine that needs to carry it. And what makes that business great isn't necessarily that you have a phenomenal machine. It needs to be good, and it needs to work, and it needs to be efficient and, do its job. But what really makes the business special is that particular product or art or talent that the creator brings to it. So we founded Ground Control around sort of being this like kind of back office, handle everything kind of business support tool. And initially we started around finance and things like that, because that was the number one thing that we got more and more people saying. Like they kind of treated it like that was the messy closet in their house, that it's like, I know I need to fix this, but like, I'm just going to keep the door shut for a little bit longer and ignore that kind of thing back there. And so they wanted help. So we started in finance and things like that, but it really has evolved to anything from kind of operational systems, financial analysis, anything that's sort of that, like the mechanics of the actual business running and operating. And so we kind of think about a business as this collection of decisions, and then kind of the legwork to carry it out. And what we hopefully do is help that business make better decisions, whether it's helping understand their business better, understand the numbers better, understand the systems, the process, the market, whatever. So it's really around kind of a data-driven intelligence of insights and analysis that we can kind of help. So if you're ever with your team or thinking about like a particular problem, and either you think or someone actually says like, we should see what the numbers look like on that, or like, let's run the numbers on this. Imagine us as kind of like a magic genie that pops up and says like, here you go, like, here's what you need to consider and take into account, and here's what the numbers actually show, and this and that. And then we're gone. And if you don't need us, we're not on your payroll. And when you do, we're there ready to deploy and help. And then a lot of times we help come up with the plan, and we actually have people who have experience operating, running, building, doing the stuff that we can kind of take it end to end. So that's kind of the quick on ground control. So again, I'd imagine everyone is here is because they saw something in the newsletter or the website or wherever this was posted that you saw it that kind of hit at a little bit of a pain point. And so if anyone has those particular things and want to talk about it, or there's particular questions or whatever, that's what I'm really interested in focusing on and helping here. So don't hesitate to raise your hand, kind of jump in. We can kind of focus this on specific things and then talk in more broader generalities. But this is kind of designed to go through this like this process and this conceptual way of thinking. But we can certainly speak to specifics as we get down it, because you inevitably have something that drew you into this in the first place. So we want it to be helpful. So, okay, hold on. I guess we skipped this one. So I was waiting for this to pop up and it bounced right past it. So a little bit, and this is relevant again, without giving the whole life story, this kind of provides some context for where ground control came out of this. So I actually started in healthcare as a financial analyst, and specifically in a hospital, you have dozens of departments that all generate revenue, cost, whatever. And so they all have their individual departments. I was an analyst assigned to help those individual business units, and they're always encouraged to treat their little entity like its own standalone business and treat it like the CEO of their little business, whether it's lab or the emergency room or surgery or whatever. They treat it like their particular business. And this was kind of the very first version of the ground control model, so to speak, because here you had the director of surgery, for example, who came from surgery. They are a surgeon or a surgical nurse or something very, very specific in their area of expertise. Why they were hired is because they're great at that particular thing. However, it still needs to run like a business. And so they would pair us with them, and we would be sort of their business support, that when they went into a meeting to explain their P&L, we were there next to them, talking through the numbers and explaining the different things. When they had questions, or when doctors asked them things, or clients or patients or whatever, we were there kind of like adding support, helping their process, getting to understand their numbers, things like that. Eventually that led into strategy and business development. So I flipped from kind of the operations and the cost side to helping manage the revenue side and seeing kind of like the front end of there. So using same kind of my background in analytics and stuff like that, but now specifically around driving growth and finding new business. I left and joined a startup. That was kind of my first exposure to a small startup environment. Hospitals tend to be pretty big, slow moving entities. And so joined a startup, and that's where that kind of hook set in, that I just love this energy of tackling a very, very specific problem. And everyone wore 10 hats, but to that one very, very specific thing. So any given day you were doing a number of things, but the goal was always the same. And I really enjoyed working in it and with startups since. I then went on to start my own company. So flipping from sort of being a part of one to actually running my own, as well as I went to work for a private equity firm that mostly in charge of their turnaround. So again, sort of the operator hat of bringing my finance and systems background, but putting on an operator hat and being the person that actually had to show up, figure out, diagnose what the problem was, and then take it end to end, come up with a plan and push it through to ultimate resolve. And then that led to ground control. And the next iteration of kind of where ground control is going is I actually just joined a group. Several of us formed a partnership called Imagine By that we're going to be launching pretty soon, that is sort of a venture studio incubator fund kind of thing, where we're going to hopefully help not only with kind of the ground control services and kind of offering that help and support, but also delivering capital, delivering partnerships, other things like that. So that kind of hopefully adds a little more context to ground control, these things. So what I'm going to do is walk through sort of the process I go through, whether it's a turnaround or a launch or any number of these things, to how do we think about this, and how do we get from a high level strategy brain of like, here's all the things we want to do, down to a very tactical moving things forward, and somehow do that little detail work in a way that when you add it all up, it does make a difference at the high level strategic perspective. So this is sort of our process, whether it's a turnaround, a new startup, a new idea, a client, any of these things. This is kind of our master framework that we start with and kind of go through. So some of this will be pretty intuitive, some of it maybe you hadn't thought of, and then kind of the specifics we'll get into a little bit here. So the first step, and this seems extremely obvious, intuitive. However, well, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, I don't know, but I'm always surprised at how often this step gets skipped over. And the reason being, it feels obvious, and so maybe the founder doesn't think to talk about it out loud or any number of things, but they just jump right into the pushing it forward without this kind of specific thing that like they're actually trying to push through. So it's very easy to spend your whole day being productive and doing things that have to get done, but not necessarily thinking about what is this productive to what end is all this kind of happening. And if we add all these things, we know these things have to get done. And you think, it's growth or it's profitability or whatever, but it really, for to see meaningful, change across an organization, you've got to get really, really specific about what that looks like. And I always start with an exercise of sort of like painting a very unquantitative picture of it. So tell me what your day looks like. Tell me what the company looks like. What's happening to it? What are you proud of? What are you struggling with? What are anything kind of this like future state that you're working towards? Paint as colorful of a picture as you can, not in terms of profitability or revenue or users or anything like that, but what does it look like? And be honest, it's easy to get pulled into the things that you feel like everybody is chasing or you're supposed to or whatever. But if it's like, look, I want to run a really good cash flow business and have time to live my life or travel or whatever, that's okay. If it's like, I want to build the next, Amazon, that's totally okay too. It can be very specific to whatever you are, but be honest about what that is. And then be very, very specific about what that looks like, how it feels to be there, those things, and kind of get that picture in your mind. It's kind of step one, because later on, you're going to compare that picture to, is this where I am now? And you want it to be as specific as possible, because it's also very common to create this nebulous picture, make tons of progress, and never actually feel like you've achieved it because it was never defined in a way that it could be achieved. It's always more. Well, more can never be met. But if you set a very specific target that this is what it looks like, and one day you look down and that's what it looks like today, great, congratulations. Doesn't mean you can't set more goals, but you did that. Take the win and then think about what you do next. So it's important to kind of give it some sort of defined and definitive set state that you want to achieve. Nope, it's jumping again. Okay. So the next piece is taking that picture and then getting very, very specific about it. So this is where we make the jump from qualitative to quantitative. So if you're saying I want more free time, let's get very specific. And how do we measure that? What does it look like? Right now you're working 50-hour weeks, 60-hour weeks, 70-hour weeks. What does it look like? Is it 30-hour weeks, or is it 40-hour weeks, but on your own terms, kind of whatever? What does that look like? And try and make it something that's very measurable, that if you were to move a number up, down, whatever, would that make that picture come to life? So if you took your hours put in and dropped it down to 30 hours, would that give you the picture that you had kind of in your mind? If you increase profitability to this thing, if you add users, if you add whatever, take that picture and start assigning very specific measurements to it to understand like what actually needs to change here, what needs to move forward. And you can start at kind of a high level, but we want to kind of drill down over time and get to some very specific metrics. You know, if it's revenue, let's get a little bit more specific than that. And you're going to sort of build your scorecard out of this. So this is how I define success. It's these 5 things, and they're measured by this. And that's sort of like, that's your starting point now to getting this kind of concrete and specific. From that, you're going to take each one of those steps and figure out like, what does a successful version of it look like? So if you see kind of here, I have this target as that first column. What do you think? And this doesn't have to be scientific, can be if you're like me and you want to run the numbers for absolutely everything, but just throw things out there as far as like, this is kind of what I think it would take to get us there. And kind of put some specific numbers around that target. Then measure your current state for each one of those things. Understand where you're at now. I kind of like this example. You definitely are, if you're at Saltbox, you probably are dealing with some sort of sales funnel and understanding kind of that. So this is a good example of like measuring every single kind of layer to that. And if you know you need to grow, it isn't necessarily like just, well, I need to get more traffic. That could be it. But if you break down the funnel into various things and you see like at the top, traffic's pretty good. Your actual interest in conversion to this is actually pretty good. Where it falls apart is here, or maybe it's return customers or something very, very specific down the pipeline. Now you have something very, very specific to focus on. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the brand or the phrase or anything Deus Ex Machina. I love it. It means God is in the machine. And that's how I love thinking about businesses. Start thinking about it as all of these connective links to this machine. There's all these pieces, and we can measure each one of those pieces to see what parts are working really efficiently and effectively, which ones are kind of where the pinches are, that kind of thing. And then everything can usually be broken down into a sub equation, and just keep breaking each one down and measuring those things. So for example, your revenue is made up of sales times your average cart size. Okay. Average cart size is made up of number of units, typical in an order, times the average price of a product. And you can go down further. Your traffic, your sales is a result of traffic times conversion. Your conversion is a combination of you keep breaking each piece down to create this string of links, and understanding kind of at each point, where are you today and where should it be, and identifying, versus trying to tackle this large thing of revenue, just zero in on this one little thing of repeat customers or conversion from traffic into subscribers, email subscribers, or something like that. And understand, again, going back to this, like, here's the current, and then isolating out that very specific gap. The way we're going to be very effective is to train all of our resources, our time, our energy and thought, money, everything into as small of a area as possible, because I kind of use the analogy of like, this is a crowbar, and a lever is applying a little bit of a force to a very small area, and that has a huge impact. And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to find that very, very small spot to apply just a little bit of force and see a larger impact to it. So as you've kind of isolated out this very, very specific thing, or these 5 very specific things, now we want to drill into and understand what do we think could actually make a difference here. So if it is something like conversion, this is where you start throwing out ideas of anything you could do. The only rule is it has to specifically, like, if you did this and did it really well, does it change conversion, or does it change repeat business, or whatever? But it has to be very focused. Some of the things will impact several. That's totally fine. It just needs to, like, does this hit this one specific thing? And start kind of assessing all of these ideas, and then ranking them and prioritizing them in terms of effort and impact is kind of the first thing we take a look at. How much are we going to get out of this versus how much are we going to put into this? And kind of first of all, ranking and sorting things there. Then looking at it like, are any of these dependent on something coming ahead of it? So then starting to order all of those things. And then there's certainly a element of momentum that it's like, this would be an easy win, get us moving, get things kind of cooking along. And then of course, like, cash flow really helps. So if there's things that you can do that build early cash flow, that you can turn that cash flow into more resources to throw towards higher resource intensive, higher impact things, great. So with those in mind, kind of create this prioritization that ultimately gets you a roadmap, and we'll start laying those things out. And to fill out this roadmap, so this is where it starts getting very tactical, and we've taken this high level strategic kind of, what do we want, drilled it all the way down, and we're going to create a plan that basically, like, every day you show up, you don't have to think about, like, what do I need to do to solve all my problems or whatever. All you do is say, I'm showing up, and this week I need to do this one, and pull that one off the shelf, set it on your workbench, and start working on how to fix this thing. And then when that's done, great, move on to the next one. And we'll talk about tracking and monitoring and seeing that that actually did it. But the idea is, like, don't try and do all these different things halfway. Get very focused, pull one thing off, and start working on that. So in this roadmap, we're going to think about in terms of a couple of things. What is required in terms of your team? What is required in terms of capital? What is required in time? This is one that a lot of folks underestimate, or maybe don't think all the way through, is the element of time here, in terms of you probably can fill your entire day every day just keeping the business running. And where is the time that you're actually going to devote to working on the business rather than inside the business? And so making sure that, one, you've got that set aside, and two, you understand what a particular project is going to require of you, and making sure that you can actually give it that time and attention, or capital. Where, what team members do you need to bring in? Do you need partnerships? Do you need additional capabilities and training and things like that? And get very specific. So as you're mapping out each one of these kind of steps that you need to tackle, list out all the things that are required of it, and start making sure that when you approach it, it's not like solving this whole big plan, but it's just following these specific steps of finding the right people, putting the right resources to it, and then working through the problem step by step. And then last, it really makes a big difference to create a dashboard for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, you want to track actual progress on this particular goal, how it's been doing, whether you believe that if you did this thing, you would see this change. Is that actually the case? Can you prove that hypothesis in the numbers actually taking off, or reducing this, or whatever the particular objective and action that you're seeking is? Like, is that happening? But two, it's really important to have, and I actually really like having both the dashboard and the roadmap up somewhere you can see it every single day, because we're just kind of, I don't know if video games did it to us, or video games capitalized on this already being in our brain. I'm not sure. But if you give someone kind of a task and just say, like, do this thing, they'll do it and they'll do it okay, and they'll kind of work on it. Maybe they'll get into it, maybe they won't, whatever. But if you say, do it, do this task, and typically it takes people 10 minutes to do it, what do you think you can do it at? Or it doesn't have to be competitive necessarily, but you add some sort of specific parameters around it and kind of create a score to it and gamify this work, even to yourself, even if you know, like, well, look, the end score is money into my pocket, obviously. No, you've got to come up with something that it's like every single day you can see results to this thing. Like, is this happening? And it's addictive. You've probably already seen this with stuff when you launched a website, you started seeing traffic, and you noticed if you did this, traffic went up. And if you did this, like, cart size went up or whatever. Same kind of thing. Create these little metrics and these little scores for you to gamify the work that you're doing, because it becomes addicting once you kind of have these things that it's actually working and it's happening, and feeling like it actually has an impact is one of the biggest drivers of like motivation for the team, for yourself, or whatever, to stay on this particular path. So make a dashboard, set it somewhere you're looking at on a regular basis, and use that to kind of push things forward for yourself and your team, so that everyone knows, look, if nothing else, we're going to get about it many different ways, but here's what we're all working towards. Here's what everything needs to drive towards. And I think even if you take nothing else from that, that's one of the things that always works when we take on a project or start a turnaround or whatever, is getting really clear about what you're working on and communicating that across the team and making it sort of this game to see how fast we can get there, how far we can beat it, whatever it is. Okay, so that's sort of the end to end, and now you've got sort of this task list to work through and hopefully a good idea of what's required and things like that. So you boiled this like nebulous idea of what winning looks like to you down to a particular timeline. One that, to be clear, this will evolve and adapt, and you're going to be fixing stuff, and you're going to be changing things, and you're going to be scrapping stuff, and you're going to figure out that, like, actually this is the thing, whatever. That's totally fine. This doesn't have to live in a stone tablet somewhere in your office. This just has to be kind of a first step at sort of creating the direction, knowing that you're going to pivot. You've got to kind of find your way to that particular path. So that was sort of a quick high level overview at kind of creating that financial roadmap and plan. Are there any particular questions? I hopefully gave a lot of time to cover the questions and get into some specifics.
Yes. I even had some people ahead of time mention that they had questions for you already prepared.
Yes,
so,
ready.
So Angela is one of our Atlanta members. Her company is called Van Blue, and she has a question for you. Go ahead, Angela.
Hello, good afternoon. So you said a mouthful.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, I think this is exactly where I am right now in trying to prioritize what tasks I have on a daily basis that make money. So when I get up every day, my question is, how am I going to make money today? And that comes with a myriad of different decisions because of the fact that I have been a solopreneur way longer than I should have been. I do focus a lot on bringing in contractors to do specific duties and project managers to work on specific tasks. But the reality is I need to have a full-time team so that I can know where the pieces are in order to implement the revenue generating tasks. And I think that what I often come back to is I wish I had someone that I can just roadmap this with, just roadmap it so that I know where those pieces could go, not just road mapping the positions, but road mapping those tasks that I know are revenue generating, because I find that I'm working on the business. I'm in the business and not on the business most times, but I know that there are tasks that I can leverage, that I can push and pull to create those revenue streams that will allow me to be able to scale and expand and hire the team members that I need. But so are you telling me what you do is actually do that road mapping? You actually hire out to do the road mapping that will create the life that I want to live?
Yeah, this is kind of hopefully a map to maybe take a long weekend, go somewhere, out of your house and, get an Airbnb. My partner and I used to go to the desert just outside of town, and we would go to where there's new environments, and it kind of like, it just tricks your brain into forcing it to think through new pathways and new whatever. And then we would just sit down and hammer out this exact process, just go step by step by step by step, writing on. I mean, you can see I have a lot of this.
I noticed that. I was quite impressed with your stickies.
I mean, Monday, all those are great. Sometimes you just need sticky notes on a wall and something to write on. So yeah, this is kind of like a process to hopefully walk you. But yes, that's a big part of what ground control does in any engagement, whatever we're being asked of. We usually start at some version of this to try and map out, because as a consultant, just to be perfectly honest, like our job is to somehow make your life better, make you feel better, make something, like to fix something in your experience and your space. And so if we leave and you feel the exact same way as before we left, you're not going to tell anyone about us. You're not going to feel all that great about it. You're not going to feel great about like the money that was spent, the time that was spent, any of those things. So when we start an engagement, just from a purely selfish perspective of our own business, we want to get very, very specific about what that is. But a lot of times that's the end of itself, is to help clients create that path, because they're, they know what to do and they kind of know. But the problem is, like, we don't have a clear path to. There's 100 ideas. Everyone can list just dozens of things of like, I could do this to make my business better. And if you pick any one of those reasons and said, like, does this make my business better? The answer is yes, but you can't do all 100. So where do you start and how do you prioritize that? And so we help sort of like from just a conversation perspective of working through with you, like, what is that actually like, kind of clearing out the noise that's in your own brain about what you think should happen or this or that, or any kind of, because you're very reactive as well as trying to be proactive, and it creates this just spin in your mind a lot of times about like where to start and where to go. So we help sort of like, again, I'm not the expert in your business. We're mostly experts in process. And so getting that noise cut down to like, here's where you need to focus. And then bringing data, and this is where we do have very specific skill sets and expertise to go through your business end to end, pull the numbers off of your website, off of your e-commerce platforms, off of your Instagram or marketing campaigns or labor statistic, whatever, QuickBooks, any of those things, and start isolating out and finding where those opportunities are, where if you put a little bit of effort, you can actually see a big impact that can unlock other pieces of the business that have just kind of, they look bad, but it's only because of this one particular thing. And then once we have sort of this data-driven prioritization and stuff, coming up with a plan for you to carry out and kind of work your way through.
Yeah, that's all very helpful. And I think that's kind of, like I said, that's where I am right now in terms of breaking through to this next level. I know what I have on my hands, but I also know that my hands are full on a daily basis. So being able to clearly define what that path looks like, defining the top three key things that I can do to move the needle, and being able to tap into being able to tap into what it is that's gonna be the most bottom line impacting duty or deliverable.
Absolutely. And I was going to get to this. For anyone that's on this call, we typically will do, for any client, we'll do sort of a 30-minute talk through to understand the business and try and get a good idea of like how we might be able to help. But for everyone on the Saltbox call and whoever listens to this in the future as well, if you reach out and mention that you saw this or whatever, we'll do a full hour where it could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be about scoping a project with us. We'll just talk through whatever you want. If you want to send us information ahead of time and say like, can you take a look at these and just tell me what you think? Yeah, happy to. You could just talk through what's frustrating you. If you want to just rant about how hard it is being a founder and how none of your friends who all have W-2 jobs understand this, I'll do it, whatever. So there's my information. If there's something that like I'm happy to talk through over a course of an hour, kind of whatever might be helpful.
I will definitely be taking advantage of that. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Angela.
Thanks, Chase. So just to clarify, like you could essentially take some information and help people analyze what it means to them. So if they have like different analytics, you would be able to say, hey, like this could be XYZ. Have you thought about this? And just helps sort of, help track trends in a different kind of way.
Yeah. So it's a good point, and one I probably didn't explain very well originally. A lot of times people hear us and they think of kind of fractional CFO or stuff like that, or they have a lot of these pain points and they go to an accountant. And some accountants are great, but accounting is really built around how do I make this accurate and kind of give you. And so the result is often here's your financials in a clean and organized way that is how the government and IRS have determined they want to see your company performance. That may or may not be what's actually helpful for your decision making. So where ground control is very different than a typical CFO, accounting, bookkeeping, whatever, which we do all that stuff as well. But where our primary focus is we're really operator forward. We've run businesses, we've built businesses, we've turned around businesses. We understand what information is needed for an actual decision to make an actual difference, not to report to some outside entity. So we're not just looking at your accounting books and QuickBooks and Xero and whatever you use. We're pulling data from your website. We're pulling it from your 3PL. We're pulling it from your marketing campaigns, Google. We're pulling data from anywhere and everywhere that your business spits off data to try and understand that performance and whittle down to an effective, like, look, you're putting a ton of time into this particular thing and it's leading to this. It could be X, Y, or Z, and here's where we kind of need to focus things. And it's using that data across the organization wherever it might be, not just your financials, but financials too.
Great, thank you. Can you, or actually let's give some more time for questions. And then at the end, if we have time, I'd love if you can kind of go through generally the pay structure and how that works. Sure. But I'll remind you of that at the end. So any other questions? Well, I didn't want to put anyone on the spot here. So maybe we can go into the pricing, and then if there's any questions at the end, we can conclude with that.
Sure.
Great.
So we typically tackle projects or engagements in two different kind of ways. Some people come in, or some businesses come in and say, like, I need help with this. Like our most common thing, 70% of our client roster either starts here or this is what they're actively working on. And it's usually around something of like, I'm raising money or kind of founding, that type of thing. Typically it's raising money. And that's a very distinct, specific project process. We start with this, we build these things, and it ends when you successfully raise capital. And so it's a very kind of easily defined type of thing. And we'll build kind of a scope around that. A lot of them then turn into, or some people come find us eventually as well for ongoing services, where it's like, we're doing these things, we're growing really fast. Like Angela was saying, I'm working on 19 different things. What this business really needs me to do is focus on this particular thing and start bringing in a team to handle these types of things. We're not here to hire a whole accounting staff or CFO or whatever. So we're just going to have some kind of fractional group provide these services. And so we're there kind of ongoing through the life of the business, right up until the point where you've either raised enough money or cash flow is good enough that you can hire on a full team of your own. And often we actually stay on even then. You'll bring on a CFO who's a little bit more kind of aligned and ingrained in the actual business, but they don't want to build out a whole team of analysts. So we kind of become their on-demand analytics department, where whatever questions they're needing to answer or speak to or whatever, we do that. So those are kind of the two paths that we typically follow. And usually it's around some sort of like rate structure that we have a handful of teams and we just bill hourly. And we do that because we want to make sure this is to an end result rather than to a budget. Certainly if anyone has kind of budget constraints, we try and fit it, but really how we try and structure our work is we look at what the opportunity is, and then we structure something to that end. If we can spend, hundreds of hours and $50,000 on a particular project that's going to make you $10,000 a year, why would we do that? No, we're going to spend only a few hours to get it good enough to get you $9,000 or something like that, and make sure that our services pay for itself, versus just saying like, yeah, it's a flat rate or it's always this many hours or whatever. We try and tailor everything to be like, what is the actual opportunity? At what point is this good enough to get most of the benefit without all the extra detail and stuff of, hiring a whole team to analyze everything that you could possibly do. We try and keep it very, very focused to what actually makes a difference and gets there, and keep that return on investment as high as possible. So we have some projects that are, a couple $1,000, some that are really large because the opportunity is really large. We always kind of tailor it to that. And then we try and deploy the right resources, whether it's like a principal level, someone who's kind of more that CFO level, or an analyst, or researchers, coordinators, anyone that kind of, bookkeeper to kind of like run down the legwork kind of stuff like that. And so we'll structure it and that kind of create an end result and what we want to get out of it. And then we'll tear after it and try and make sure that the right team members are doing the right level of work to get the most efficiency out of kind of what you're paying. But at the end of the day, we gauge our results on what did you ultimately pay us for and what did you get out of it. And if we've done our job, it should be a pretty easy justification for our fees and stuff like that. So I don't know if that answers like specifically. I think the rates are, we kind of have tiers around like the 60 to $75 an hour. We have tiers that are kind of more analyst, higher level stuff that's, 125, 150 an hour. And then hopefully you don't need too much. It's more of like kind of oversight, and the general strategy of the project is done by a principal that's around 250 or something an hour. So that's kind of how it works. We also do things like we'll do sort of incentive-based fee structures where a part of it might be put at risk for success. So in the case of a fundraise, like we'll put a cap on the fees, and then anything we have to do to get it done above that basically goes into this lump that when the raise is successful, we get paid that out with a certain premium on it for the kind of the deferred at-risk component. And then sometimes we'll even do a full equity split where we'll actually work with and sort of like take a reduced fee structure in exchange for equity. We do that in sort of long-term partnerships to kind of help transition to whatever that next level is, and then often beyond. But we'll do something like that when the case makes sense as well. So we're really into sort of like thinking through what's the goal of the founder, the entrepreneur, the business. How can we help, and what's the most effective way? We wouldn't be a very good creative financial company if we couldn't find effective ways for us to make money in alignment with the value that we provide. So that's what we try and do.
Got it. And I saw also on your website that y'all have the 101 courses and the Q&A session. So that could be a good option as well for our members to kind of learn as they go. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And thanks again for sharing the special for the consult or / vent session, depending on.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to, I'll make sure that everyone on the call has access to your email. And if anyone else reaches out, I'll definitely pass them along.
Cool.
Are there any other burning questions before we hop off? Last chance. Okay. Well, thanks again. This was great. And we'll see y'all in a couple weeks to the rest of the Saltbox team.
Good luck, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.